Welcome back to another episode of the Ohio Bass Podcast. I'm your host, Nick. You can follow me on X or on TikTok at Ohio_Bass, on Threads or on Instagram at Ohio_Bass_outdoors, or you can always email the show at theohiobasspodcast@gmail.com.
Recognize.
So, as always, we have a super special guest this time. We're going to take a trip down to Texas and talk to a lady kayak angler who fishes some very high-level bass tournaments. Looking down at my notes, I really try to cover everything. We talk about different setups, gear, how do you research each tournament, do you fish the same lakes, do you fish different lakes, and how do you approach those two differently? Fishing style, how you locate fish, weather conditions, do you have any fishing advice for people trying to get into tournament fishing? And I think at one point she actually walks us through her last tournament experience. And another reason why I wanted to bring her on is this is actually our second conversation. So she was one of 10 people that I did a private hour-long video interview for internal R&D purposes for a company that I'm with. And while we crushed that, there were a lot of topics that we were not allowed to really discuss that were, off point in that setting. So I wanted to bring her on and talk about social media and the fishing industry. She has a background in both, and it is very, very interesting on her take on social media, and she gives a lot of advice for people out there and what you should do with your account, what you shouldn't do with your account, what she sees people doing wrong and right, and she breaks it down in a way differently than I view it, and you kind of get two perspectives. You get my perspective and her perspective. There's a lot of things we agree with. There's some things that we kind of disagree with, but definitely super interesting. Also, after the interview was over, I wanted to ask her a couple of questions, and we just continued talking, and I looked up at the clock, and we went another 45 minutes, and I said, oh my gosh, I think some of this stuff is actually better than the interview we recorded. So it was kind of funny. She said, yeah, absolutely, if you need to use any of this, feel free. There are a couple things that I'm going to keep off the record for both of us, but yeah, so I guess you'll get some bonus content. So at the end, when you hear the music start playing, typically when the podcast is over, don't stop listening. I'll definitely have some bonus content in there just for you. All right, quick plug. Slab Reaper Tackle, 803-687-6152. I'm looking at about 4,000 baits I have right now at my workbench. Every single color combination you can imagine. Actually, Slab Reaper Tackle is the only phone number I have memorized. Not my employer, not my girlfriend, not my brother. If I was in a situation where I lost my phone, the only person I could call would be Slab Reaper Tackle. I would call them, I'd order some crappie jigs, and they'd help me get back on track. Number again, 803-687-6152. At this point, I should probably just put them down as an emergency contact. Number again, 803-687-6152. Ask for Bubba.
Yes, sir!
And one last thing before we get to the interview, I'd always like to say the whole purpose of this program is just to have a conversation with another angler who lives in, a different part of the United States or even a different part of the world. And I learned so much from these things, and it doesn't matter if you fish for catfish or carp or bass or trout, walleye, or all of them. Having somebody on and getting a different perspective from somebody who lives in a different region is amazing, and I love being able to share it with all of you. So if you have somebody in mind that you'd like to be on the podcast, let me know. Or if you would like to be on the podcast, I'm on every social media platform. Just send me a message. And possibly if you don't want to be on the program, you just have a question, let me know. And if I can't answer it, I probably know somebody that can. So as always, I truly appreciate the support. And with that being said, let's hit it.
What have I got?
Let's head to the hotline presented by Deeper Sonar. Head to deepersonar.com to check out the new cutting-edge Quest bait boat. So, I'm very excited to bring on one of the best social media content creators I know, a longtime follow on Instagram. Her name is Wesley Gray. Wesley, how are you doing, my friend?
Hey, absolutely, Nick. Happy to be a guest on the show. Thanks for the invite.
Of course. And thank you for not only taking the time to have a conversation with me, but also the audience. So I really appreciate that. In the beginning, I always like to ask the guests to kind of give us a little background. Let us know where you're from, how you grew up fishing, maybe what you're doing now, and I'll leave it open ended for you.
Okay, sure. Yeah. So, like I said, I'm really happy to be a guest on the show. My name is, of course, is Wesley Gray. I live in Huntsville, Texas. So I am from kind of the deep East Texas piney woods. And I grew up bass fishing. So as a kid, just spent a lot of time bank fishing out of the back of the boat with my dad and my grandpa. And similar story to a lot of people out there, right? Just kind of grew up doing it and have always loved fishing and just kind of decided a couple of years ago, about, I don't know, I guess 3 years ago now, to start fishing kayak tournaments, which is something that I've really been passionate about. It's a lot of fun. I enjoy doing it, traveling all over the United States and fishing lakes I've never been to, catching smallmouth. That wasn't something I grew up doing. So that's probably, I think, one of my favorite parts is big giant river smallies, right?
Right? Well, how often do you fish? Is it all year round or is it more like a seasonal thing?
Oh, even though I live in Texas, I do kind of am a little seasonal. I don't fish a whole lot in the month of December and January. So those are the 2 months that I take a little bit of time off. But pretty much outside of that, between from February through November, I'm usually at a tournament somewhere or on the water somewhere fishing, doing something.
So, do you primarily fish for just bass, or do you branch out and fish other species sometimes?
Primarily bass fishing. I don't fish for a whole lot of other like freshwater species. I am kind of lucky in the sense that I am part of a saltwater fishing team called the High Cotton.
Okay.
And people, you can look them up on Instagram if you want to. But so I do get to do a little bit of saltwater fishing every now and then, but I don't quite follow the tournament scene on that like I do for the freshwater fishing.
Two-part question here. First, what led you up to the decision to buy your first kayak? And secondly, what made you gravitate toward fishing high-level bass tournaments so quickly?
Okay, that's a great question, and I want to answer it the right way, right? Like, so let me think about this for a second. I grew up loving fishing. Pretty much, if I wasn't like with my dad or somebody that like could drive a boat or had a boat or whatever, I was,
Okay.
ended up fishing from the bank, right? And I can remember, like, you sit there and you're fishing from the bank and it's like, oh man, I really wish I could get to that spot over there, right? And so in my head, I was like, if I had a kayak, I could get over there. If I had a
Yeah,
kayak,
yeah.
I could do this. And I mean, for years, like years and years, like, man, I wish I had that. Man, I wish I had that. Well, kind of like after the pandemic, I just kind of said, you know what? Like, I keep saying this all the time. I'm going to buy a kayak. And I kind of just didn't want to, like, I didn't want to buy a kayak from like Walmart or Academy or something
Of
like that
course.
because I knew I wouldn't like it. Like, I knew
Yeah.
I wouldn't like a paddle kayak. And I'm sorry for the paddle purists out there. I'm sure that hurts their hearts a little bit. And so what I did is I went and did a little research and decided that I thought I'd like a native kayak.
Recognize.
And I
Okay.
went and I went and bought a native Slayer Max 12.5. So my first kayak was kind of out of the box. Like I knew I wanted to fish. I hadn't decided like the tournament thing yet. I
Hmm.
had looked into it a little bit and thought, yeah, that might be cool. So I get my native, I get it home, I actually built a trailer for it.
Nice.
And because I knew like I'm not going to be able to car top this thing and I got to have a way to haul it around. And so I went fishing in my native kayak, I think 2 times
Okay.
before I fished my first tournament. I knew, like, I always have to do things with a purpose. And this is like a weird personal thing with me. And maybe it's not weird and I'm just saying it is. But like everything, like if I'm going to spend a lot of money on something, like I have to have a purpose for doing that.
Okay.
And I'd always wanted to fish Lake Fork, but I couldn't just quite get myself just to go get a hotel room, drive up there for the weekend, and just go fishing with no reason.
Yeah.
And so there just happened to be a couple of weeks down the road, a tournament, a Bassmaster tournament, the kayak Bassmaster tournament on Lake
Mhm.
Fork. And so I
Okay.
said, you know what? I'm going to register for this tournament. It's whatever it was, like $250 or something to register. And I'm going to go fish this tournament. And that's what I did. And I loved it. It was so much fun. I had a blast.
How many different tournaments do you fish a year?
Oh, 10 or 11 or more. Just kind of
Okay.
depends. Typically I'm fishing at least one a month.
Okay.
But sometimes, like, I don't fish in December, I don't fish in November. And I'm sorry, not November. I don't fish in December or January. So sometimes like July, August, sometimes there's more than one tournament in those. So,
Okay.
but yeah.
So do you only fish one tournament trail or do you fish maybe a couple different ones?
Yeah, so I generally fish. There's a couple of national trails
Okay.
out there for folks, or that a lot of people are familiar with. So there's the Hobie Bass Open Series, the Hobie BOS,
Okay.
and then there's the Bassmaster Kayak Series. And then of course Bassmaster has like the Nation Series, which is like regional, and there's lots of like regional trails in Texas and other states too.
Okay.
I kind of cherry pick the national tournaments that I want to fish.
Hmm.
And each of them have like a point system for like Angler of the Year, that kind of thing. So I definitely try to fish enough tournaments out of each national trail so that I can try to qualify with points for the
Okay.
championship. I was really, really close with Hobie last year. I was like the first person out of the
Ouch.
championship.
Ouch.
Yeah. So it was tough. It was tough.
So how far do you have to travel for all these tournaments? Are they close to Texas or are they all over the place?
Oh God, no, all over the place. So last year, I think the furthest that I went was La Crosse, Wisconsin, which is about 18 hours from my house.
Okay.
And then I went to the New River in West Virginia, which was probably also the same distance. I think it was also 18 hours. I've flown into Pennsylvania to fish the Susky 2 years ago, year before last. So yeah, so I've hopped on a plane to go fish a kayak tournament before.
Nice. So do the tournaments fish the same lakes every season or do they switch it around from year to year?
They kind of switch it up on us a little bit every now and then. I think there's only a handful of lakes on the national trails that I've fished more than once. So
Okay.
the Susquehanna is one that appears pretty regularly. La Crosse in Wisconsin is a staple. Sam Rayburn, Lake Fork, all of those are ones that I've fished multiple national trails on.
All right. Let's get a little nerdy here. So, do you approach a new lake the same way that you would approach a lake, let's say, for the third or fourth time?
Ah, okay. So if I'm fishing a lake for the first time, yeah, my approach on that is going to be determined on like what time of year it is and where geographically that lake is located in the United States. So
Okay.
those two things are going to kind of help me determine what part of the lake to start on. And but generally speaking, I am going to kind of go in practice. I'll start mid-lake and then the next day I'll maybe go somewhere down toward the south end of the lake, and then I may go toward the north end of the lake, and depending on what I find in those different locations may determine maybe me, sticking with an area for another day to see if I can figure it out, kind of thing. If it's a lake I've fished before, I try not to get stuck on history, because especially like Sam Rayburn, which is my home lake. I fish Sam Rayburn a lot. when I'm fishing a tournament on Rayburn, I do, you got to use the information that you have in history to your advantage when you can. So it helps me eliminate some water sometimes, but I'll definitely try to take it with a clean slate and go back and say, okay, this is what I've done historically in the past on this lake. Like I've fished here and it's done good, and I may go check it out for a little while, like maybe spend an hour there in practice.
All right.
And if I'm not getting what I think I should get given the time of year and location, I'm going to go somewhere I've never been before.
Okay. Without giving away all your secrets,
Yeah.
how do you research new lakes? Do you do any preparation before you get there?
Oh, Google Earth. Google
Okay.
Earth is your friend. Yeah. And whatever whatever the water tables are, or like water management organization or whatever you want to call it for that area is. So like I'm looking at Google Earth and I want to know what the water levels are right now. And so I
Okay.
go check water level right now, and then, Google Earth, you have to use the desktop version. You can't use the online version, but you can roll it back in time
Okay.
and see, like, so a lot of times, and I don't, this is, I'm not a big on like gatekeeping secrets. So if you didn't know you could do this, now you do. Roll the lake back in time. You want to know what the lake looks like at the time of year that you're going to be there fishing. That's one thing. And then you
Yeah.
want to know what the lake looks like when it was at its lowest point. So when
Okay.
you go back and you find a really, really point in time where the water's really low, it could be 10 years ago that the water was that low. It allows you to mark underwater structure
Okay.
in the lake because you can see it on Google Earth. So you can mark some waypoints on there,
Yeah.
and chances are that rock ain't moving.
Yeah.
That bridge isn't going anywhere. That pylon is still there. Probably the brush pile is still there. So that's kind of like a well kept, but not so well kept secret.
So, unfortunately, I don't fish for bass a lot outside of Ohio. I do fish for a lot of different species in Ohio, and it looks like every species I have a different tackle bag for. Have you found that bass maybe behave differently depending on, different states or different locations?
Oh, for sure. I don't know that it's so much that they just behave differently because it's so much in a different state. I definitely think bass they're creatures of habit and they love structure.
Yeah.
So I think if you know how bass behave around certain kinds of structure, like brush piles, grass,
Mm-hmm.
whatever it might be, they're going to behave pretty much the same way, in my opinion. They behave pretty much the same way, like the bass in Georgia pretty much act the same way the bass in Texas do whenever it comes to wood. You know
Okay.
what I mean? That's kind of sort of my thought on it.
So you film a lot of social media content, and it's really, really good, by the way. Do you find it hard to concentrate on the tournament while you're filming at the same time?
When I first started fishing tournaments, I was really overwhelmed. I didn't really film anything. I
Okay.
didn't run a GoPro, and it was really overwhelming because it was kind of like, how am I going to get all of this stuff ready? And, what if my battery goes out on my GoPro, or what if my
Mm-hmm.
SD card is? So it was, kind of adding a level of complexity to the tournament day that I just wasn't ready for.
Okay.
But as I have become a more proficient tournament angler, in the sense of, and I'm a really OCD, very, very organized. Like if you ever look at like my tackle or my stuff inside my car, like everything goes in the same place every time. And I don't let anybody put up or touch my stuff, because if it gets put somewhere that it's not supposed to be, I think I don't have it or I've lost it or something.
Yeah.
But in the last probably year and a half, I've been able to, like, I've got all of that down now, and I got the right equipment. I got the right gear and recording equipment that I needed to make that much easier on me.
Sure. Okay.
So that's what I think most people's biggest mistake is. Like they don't want to spend the money on the big external battery to run their GoPro all day. So they're trying to like change out batteries like every hour or two,
Hmm.
and that's just not an efficient use of your time, and it's just going to kind of mess up your whole tournament day. So
Sure. So, can you kind of break down your gear for us? Like, what's your kayak look like on tournament day? Maybe talk about how many rods that you have, your tackle, the preparation.
Sure, for sure. So typically, like I don't know that I have a magic formula for this. And some people think carrying 6 rods is crazy. Some people think that you only need three. Some people think you need 14. I think it just kind of depends on everybody's individual style, but I am always going to have a chatterbait rod,
Okay.
always. Doesn't really matter where I am. I'm always going to have a chatterbait rod. I'll probably like now I typically use practice to narrow down what I'm going to need on tournament day.
All
So
right.
in practice, I've got the kitchen sink. I've got
Mm-hmm.
everything. I've got, 10, 12 rods. I mean, my kayak probably weighs 300 pounds with just gear. But by the time tournament day rolls around, I've probably narrowed it down to probably, I don't know, 6 to 8 rods at the most.
Okay.
But yeah, so definitely chatterbait rod, top water, something that I can throw like a Texas rig or a spinnerbait on. And I always carry 2 spinning rods, one with a wacky worm and one with a fluke, hands down. And the exception to that is if I am fishing like a river or like the New River or up at the Susquehanna, something like that,
Okay.
I will add a third spinning rod with something else like a Ned rig or some other kind of like light tackle.
So, do you think you have a certain fishing style? Like, there's power fishing, there's finesse fishing. Do you try to stay more balanced? Sorry, it's kind of a loaded question.
Yeah, and that's one like for me is really hard to answer because I feel like I love doing both equally as much. Like I love power fishing. Like I love being able to power fish, like running a chatterbait or a
Yeah.
buzz bait or something like that. Like I love it. But I mean, if you look at a lot of my social media stuff, probably a lot of it, some people are like, does a girl even use a bait caster? Because it's I'm skipping a fluke or I'm skipping
Yeah.
a wacky rig. And some of it depends on what the lake needs and what the fish are biting on is
Sure.
is how I think I'm equally good at power fishing and finesse fishing. I'm not a great drop shot gal. Like I'm
Hmm.
not great at that. So, maybe if I ever get really good at drop shotting, I'll consider myself a finesse person, but not quite yet.
That's funny. And all I use is spinning reels. I actually fish for like 30, 40 pound catfish with spinning reels. So I don't blame anybody for using spinning reels too much. So, can you bring us behind the curtain? What's it like to actually fish a high level kayak tournament?
Tournament day, game day, like if by the time I've gotten to the water, I am really focused on getting to wherever my spot is the fastest. Like
Okay.
that is especially like Rayburn this past tournament, one of these last tournaments that I fished. Like that one was a big deal because it was like a 45-minute motor ride to
Yeah.
my spot. It was a long way. But like once you get there, once you get over that kind of like first cast hump for me, because it's
Hmm.
like, oh my gosh, am I going to throw the wrong thing? Like, am I going to mess it up or whatever? But I just kind of, when I get in the zone and I start fishing and I try to not get stuck with, I have to catch fish on this one thing because I caught them on this in practice.
Hmm.
So I will swap rods a lot. Like if I cast that chatterbait 5 times in 5 different areas and I'm not getting a sniff, I'm gonna go
Hmm.
back and I'm gonna clean up with something else.
Okay.
So I'm going to pretty much consistently swap until I get a bite, until I figure out what it is. And then once I start getting bit on something, it's probably going to be locked in my hand for the rest of the day, or
Yeah.
or until we've got like a significant change, right? So like in the morning you might get bit on top water, right? But
Okay.
once the sun comes up and the water stop and the wind dies down,
Hmm.
you may have to move to something else. Those fish have transitioned to a different part of their day, right? So that's something that is really important. And covering water. That was something that I didn't really understand when I first started fishing tournaments. I was
Yeah.
like, I'm just going to fish this little tiny cove in here and just see what I can catch.
Hmm.
And I have really learned that, if you're in a spot for 20, 30 minutes and you haven't gotten a bite,
Yeah.
and you were getting ate up in practice in that spot, it's time to go somewhere else.
Yeah.
Like you got to move. So, and not be afraid to move, right? Like even if it's a long way away, like you got to go where the fish are, you got to find them. So, and you can't do that sitting in the same spot all day.
Yeah. So, like, if I self reflect, I think that I move around way more than most people probably do. And I also change baits a lot quicker than most people do, too. And if something's not working within maybe 5, 6 minutes, I might not even change the bait if I think that's the right choice. I might just change the color. And if I'll give that maybe 5 or 6 more minutes. And if that doesn't work, then, I'm off to something else. So you kind of already answered this question, but do you have any advice for somebody that's maybe going to go fish, their first, second kayak tournament, something that you've learned that you wish you would have known when you started?
Yeah, sure. So I think that thinking about what your before you ever get on the water for tournament day, like the night before, and this is kind of one of the things that I do. I sit down and I think about all of the different things that I've learned in practice, right?
Okay.
you know, I got bit at this time of day off of this kind of structure with this kind of bait, with this color. This is the wind. This is the water temperature. Every little thing is a variable in your tournament day recipe, right?
Hmm.
So you got to think about all of those different things and what do those tell you? And then that's going to kind of help you plan, okay, I'm taking this rod, this tackle box, this color bait, I don't need these 5 bags of plastics. Like narrow down your stuff a little bit. And then you've got to pick, I would say for a tournament day, I want to have at least 4 to 6 different spots that I know that I'm going to go to. Like I'm going to start here and I'm
Hmm.
going to fish for this amount of time. If I don't get bit, I'm going to move here and check this. If I don't get bit, I'm going to move here. And then that way you kind of have a game plan in your head of
Hmm.
where you're going to go, what you're going to fish with, that kind of thing. Even if you don't necessarily, it's not so much like you have to follow it to the T, but you
Yeah.
need to sit down and plan it out in your mind and then
Hmm.
be willing to adjust on the fly.
I
That
was
that that's my biggest thing is like sit down and think about what your actual game plan is going to be.
And that's good advice. And I was going to ask you, is it hard to stick to that once you get out there? Because there are times where I'd like to do one thing and then all of a sudden I completely deviate from what I was doing. And then
Yeah.
I get home and think, oh my gosh, why didn't I just stick to what I was supposed to do when I went
Yep.
out there in the beginning? So,
Yeah. Definitely. I don't know that there's a single tournament day that I've ever stuck to the whole plan, but because I had sat down and thought through all of the different things, if by okay, I got to my second spot, it's got a lot of grass on it, I'm just tearing them up on a chatterbait. And then
hmm.
maybe the bite kind of dies. And then you know what? This fourth or fifth spot that I was going to go to over here, I'm pretty sure it's got some grass around it. I'm gonna go ahead and just go straight over there and see if maybe I can match the pattern that I have found in this other spot. So I mean, definitely being able to make adjustments on the fly is
Yeah.
100% necessary. And being able to like handle a curveball, because I've been thrown some big time curveballs on the way to the ramp in the morning that have made me have to go, holy cow, my whole day is going to now have to be completely different.
Yeah, yeah. So we kind of talked about this a little bit when our first conversation, but I know you mentioned the atmosphere, the fishing culture that you're around, and how you really enjoy it. Can you describe that in a little more detail?
Yeah. So, and this is something I think a lot of people who fish kayak tournaments will say is we have a really big sense of community. Whether it's a national trail or whether it's your local regional trail, it's just a different atmosphere than boat tournaments. And I don't quite know how to explain it unless
Yeah.
you just go. Like when you go, like you'll understand. But it's definitely a huge sense of community. I mean, everybody is willing to help everyone, at Rayburn. I'll give you an example. At Rayburn, my throttle controller for my motor just kind of died.
Okay.
And during practice, last day of practice, in the middle of the day, just kind of quit working, and we couldn't figure out why. And so I made two phone calls, was able to get a hold of somebody at Mariner Sales in Dallas, which is about 4.5 hours
Wow.
from Rayburn. Okay. Within about 30 minutes, they had gotten a hold of somebody who was going by Mariner to pick something up, who was coming to Rayburn, and they drove a motor and a battery and a new throttle controller for me from Dallas so that I
Nice.
could have a motor for that tournament.
Nice.
So when people are always willing to go the extra mile, like you forget something, somebody's got one you can borrow.
Mhm.
It's just everybody, I think, once the clock hits lines in, it is definitely a competition, definitely fierce. I wouldn't necessarily call it cutthroat. I think a lot of us are better than that. It's just one of the best senses of community that I have ever experienced in any kind of organized sport.
Yeah, that's awesome. I know you partner with a lot of different companies. Have you had a chance to make it down to ICAST yet?
I have not been to ICAST yet, Nick. That's one that the companies that I work with, none of them so far have like gone to ICAST.
Oh.
So yeah, I haven't had the opportunity to do that yet.
Yeah, I really hope you can make it down there soon because if you like that kind of atmosphere, you're just surrounded with like your peers down there. It's amazing. It's electric. Um, I'll actually be going down again this year with Deeper Sonar. I'm super excited about it. A couple years ago, I went down with American Tackle, and just the people that you meet down there and the relationships that you build is amazing. It's amazing. And speaking of relationships and social media, can you kind of talk about what led you up to make the decision to, without giving away too much personal information? So you kind of do social media and marketing full time, correct?
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting. So I work at a university in Texas, and my undergraduate degree is in marketing. I have a master's degree in business, and it's just something I've always been interested in. So it's not 100% my actual day job. My day job, I oversee like the marketing and communication team for the college that I work for, which is, under the umbrella of the university that I'm at. So
Okay.
I do oversee that marketing and communication team. My job is really like strategic planning and operations, but given my background in marketing, I built the marketing team that we have at our college.
Sure.
And so, but yeah, I don't really know why I went into it to begin with. I think I just really like marketing and communicating, and social media kind of became a thing when I
Yeah.
was in college. So I feel like I was like on the forefront. I was like one of the very first users of Facebook
Yeah.
back when it was college students only, and you literally entered your college schedule, and
What?
those were your Facebook friends. So I've always kind of had like a little bit of an interest in it and just kind of a knack for it. Yeah, so and then when I started kayak fishing and like tournaments and stuff like that, I didn't really expect to kind of be where I am today with my own like personal social media for my fishing. It was, something that I was like, well, maybe I'll like make some of these, maybe I'll try this for myself and make some of my accounts public and let's see what happens. And so really just this past year is whenever I've really kind of hit my fishing social media with a lot of what I know and where my expertise is professionally. And it's done pretty good so far.
Yeah, and I know that like the first time that we talked, you kind of mentioned briefly that you just started to utilize like the concepts and the tools you do at work for your own personal social media accounts.
Obviously I have, lots of different profiles, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok and YouTube are primarily all my fishing stuff.
Okay.
And so everybody kind of they usually ask, they're like, well, how do you manage all of that? And so it's not the same one that I use for work. We use a different program, different platform for our college stuff, but that's a whole variety of different reasons. But I typically use a company called later.com, and that's how I schedule all of my stuff. Like I batch up content, I get it scheduled, it kind of helps you optimize when to post and all of that kind of stuff. So if you're really gonna spend a lot of time, you want to optimize your presence on social media. It's really hard to do that without a third-party platform, in my opinion.
Sure.
If you've never used one before, I highly recommend trying it. There are lots of people who do it without it.
Yeah.
But it will be a game changer for you if you'll just, it does cost a little bit of money to do it, but it's money well spent if you're going to really dive into trying to have a good, like, professional social media presence.
So, what's your take on social media in the fishing industry and the impact that it's had? Mostly positive, negative? Do you have mixed feelings about that?
Yeah, that is an interesting question. I think that social media, I don't think that it's necessarily been bad for the fishing industry as a whole. I think that you could actually apply this to pretty much any industry, Nick. So, if we're going to pick on fishing, the great thing that it does, the positive thing that social media brings to the table is the ability to communicate with people, to reach people that you would have never reached before, right?
Yes.
I probably would never have met you if it wasn't for social media. Like
Very
the
true.
opportunities that it brings your way, I think outweigh the negative piece of it, right?
Okay.
So, positive things, you can watch videos on any fishing technique, any fishing bait, any boat, any paddle, like anything out there, somebody's done a video on it on Instagram or YouTube. Just the amount of information out there to help you make informed decisions, improve your techniques is phenomenal.
Yeah.
Phenomenal. The downside of it is there are some people out there who, they're negative. They want to share, they hate, and it's the big thing right now, forward-facing sonar. Oh my God, it's the end of the world. And people are like, I try not to like get involved in the drama. Like I try to stay out of the drama.
Yeah.
I have forward-facing sonar on my kayak.
Mm-hmm.
Do I use it? Pretty much no. Like it's a lot harder than people think it is.
Yeah.
And fish do not jump in your boat. It's just not how it works.
So, can you give some advice on, let's say you have a smaller account, maybe just a few hundred followers on Instagram. What are some good things you can do, and what are definitely some things you should not do if you want your account to get noticed?
So my recommendation for small accounts that want to grow, first and foremost, optimize your profile. What does that mean? That means get your name right. Whether it's like mine is Wesley Gray Fishing, Christine Fisher is Midwest Fisher Gal. Get your profile name the way you want it that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're that car dude 49, nobody is going to take you seriously as a fishing account. So get your profile name right, get your bio, your description, get that set the way that you want it, and make it short and sweet and optimized in the sense that it's about what your account is about. Because your profile description is one of the only things that is like searchable on Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, yes, you can search hashtags. Yes, sometimes things like in captions or whatever, but it will, when people are looking for accounts about fishing, that search comes from the text in your profile, like your bio.
Sure.
So those two things are important. The next pieces are, it's not necessarily about how many hashtags you use. Don't tag a bunch of random people in your post. That's not going to help you, but you're going to have to spend time in the app. So good visuals that make sense. So, reels are great content. Well done photos.
Mm-hmm.
And, think about one of the things that I did last year is I sat down and I picked out 3 companies that I really admire their social media presence, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tell you who they are. They're Sims Fishing, Yeti, and Bahio Sunglasses. Those 3 companies, I love the way they do social media. Love it. And so I follow them, and every time they get a post or every time they post something, I get a notification. And so even though I'm not a brand selling things,
Sure,
they are like my spirit animal for social media.
Okay.
So I look at how they write captions. I look at what tags they use, what hashtags they use. I try to incorporate some of the techniques that they use in their social media in my own social media. So like styles of video, styles of photo, and that's, so if there's like a particular content creator that you really like,
Yeah.
go out there and think about what it is that you really like them for. What is it about their account that appeals to you? And then try to do some of the same things with your own account. Because they didn't get that way for no reason. You don't necessarily have to post every day. I would come up with a plan and try to stick to it. Like I'm going to post once a week and try to stick to it, or twice a week and try to stick to it. And don't just post content to post content. Post content with a purpose.
Yeah, and I'd also like to add, some of the guidelines for the companies that I've worked for in the past. They want to see diversity. They don't want to see the same selfie over and over again. Product placement. You want some reels, action shots, different backgrounds. If you have a good mixture of different images on there, and high quality images too. It doesn't matter how many followers you have or how good of a presence you have. You might not be considered if your photos or content just look terrible. So one thing that you kind of talked about, and I don't know if you want to talk about this or not, but I'll ask the question. You were kind of turned down from a company because you didn't have enough followers.
Yeah. So yeah, that's something that I think is kind of a trap that a lot of anglers and companies fall into, right? So your number of followers is just one metric that your account should be measured by, right? It should not be the be all end all. And so, yeah, there was a company that I had, reached out to about, working with them. And they turned me down because they were like, well, you only have, I don't know, I think I had less than 1,000 followers at the time on Instagram. And they were like, well, you don't have very many followers. Like, that's not really going to do anything for us. But when you looked at the other metrics in my account at the time, I could post something and the reach on it would be 40,000 people,
Yeah.
80,000 people. So I might have only had 1,000 followers, but there were tens of thousands of people seeing my content. And so, and I didn't argue with him about it. I just said, okay, great, thank you, appreciate it, and moved on to something else. But what will happen is anglers or other people will get caught up in, I've got to have 10,000 followers. I've got to have this number of followers, or these people, they're not going to sponsor me. They're not going to want me on their team. They're not going to think I'm good. And so what they'll do is, and I encourage your listeners to go out there and Google it. There are companies that you can just go, I want to buy 10,000 premium followers.
Yeah.
And you pay probably, I don't know, hundreds of dollars. It can get very expensive, and it depends on the company that you try to go with. And yeah, they'll get you followers, but they're all fake. They're all fake. And so I don't know, and I'm not going to call anybody out. And some people, like, I've had lots of people, because I've talked about social media on lots of different shows.
Sure.
They'll reach out to me and they'll say, like, Wes, I don't understand. Like, my engagement is in the dumps. Like, my engagement is like less than 1%. But I've got 30,000 followers and no one engages with my content. And I'm like, okay, so give me just a minute. Let me get back to you. There are services out there where you can run people's social media handles through them, and it will give you an estimated number of their followers that are fake. And if you're when I go do that and those numbers are coming back to me as 30, 40, 50, 60, 80% of your followers are fake, then I know you've gone out there and bought followers, and that's why your engagement is trash. Because the engagement is a formula, right? It's a calculation that's based off of your number of followers.
Yeah.
And it breaks my heart because I don't think that the people understand that when they do this, one, you're breaking Instagram's terms of service and they could shut your account down.
Yeah.
And then you won't have anything. Two, they don't understand that they're really fake followers. They're not real people that are interested in your content.
Yeah.
And three, you have fooled these companies that you are working with into thinking you have this very influential social media presence that you don't actually have. So companies are spitting out a lot of money to some of these people that they're not getting a good return on their investment.
Have you ever thought about reaching out to some of these small to mid-level companies about maybe running a pro staff? Because you definitely have the background.
No, I've never actually thought about it. They would, and honestly, Nick, they would probably hate me because I would be checking all of their social media followings and being like, 50% of this person's followers are fake.
Yeah.
Like, this is not going to work for us.
Okay. All right.
I mean, like, they would, like, I would be very good. Like, the company would probably love me.
Sure.
But the anglers would be like, man, she's tough. Like, she ain't taking no BS off of any of us.
Yeah, I just always found it super interesting, and doing that, I've met a lot of good people, and I'm still in contact and friends with a lot of them too. So I didn't have that wrote down here as a question. I just thought I'd bring it up. So I'm guessing that Instagram and TikTok and YouTube are your primary channels, but I would like to ask you, do you think X can make a comeback? And what do you think about Threads? I just actually found out Threads was a thing last weekend.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So, yeah, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube are my biggest followings. Facebook, even though like I was one of the original users, Facebook is still a mystery to me. Like I haven't
Yeah.
figured out the magical formula for that on Facebook yet.
Hmm.
As far as X goes, I am not a fan. I was never a fan whenever it was Twitter,
Okay.
and I just don't know that the bang is worth it. Like the juice isn't worth the squeeze, if you
Sure.
will. Um, I don't know how I feel about that. I just don't think it lends itself to the kind of content and the audience that we typically have in fishing.
Hmm.
You know, if you look at the demographics, at least for some of my accounts,
Hmm.
and this is why fishing, the Facebook thing to me is kind of a mystery. If I look at the demographics of my followers on, say, Instagram or YouTube, those demographics fit the typical Facebook user to a T.
Okay.
And I can't get followers on Facebook. Like it's just not happening for me. But I just don't think we've got a lot of people in that demographic who use X. I
Okay.
think sometimes people think you have to have, well, I have to be on every platform, right? Like if I'm
Yeah.
not on every platform, then I'm not doing it right. I would much rather do a smaller number of platforms really, really well
Okay.
than do all of them semi good.
Yeah. How do you feel about Threads? Because it's very similar to Twitter.
It is. And so listen, I do have Threads. It I don't know that I like it. So, you know, of course, for people who don't know, like it's connected to Instagram, and I mean, I have more followers on Threads than I do Facebook.
Yeah.
So, and I really don't post much, and I just don't know, man. Like I don't know what I think about it. I feel like it's the same thing as X
I
slash Twitter.
well, I feel like it's because it's the same followers on Instagram. So are they expecting you to post something on Instagram and to post the exact same thing on Threads with the exact same following that you have? To me, that kind of seems redundant to me.
Yeah,
And
I
then,
don't know.
and then Facebook always seemed, and every time you have a fan page or if you run a business page, it always seems like it's like a pay to play type of thing where you have to pay a certain amount of money to get certain amount of views.
Yeah,
That's
I agree with you on the Facebook thing for sure. Yeah, like, and that's where I'm thinking that I'm gonna have to go for that. Like, the only thing I'll say about Threads is this, and this might be the one thing that it's like, you know, if you're an early adopter,
hmm
it may help you out because whenever I created my Threads account, which was probably in like, I'm looking at it on my phone right now, it was in October, okay?
hmm
And I posted this picture. Now I love Whataburger. I'm from Texas.
Okay.
So I have an unhealthy obsession with Whataburger. For those of
Yeah.
you know, if you know, you know.
Recognize.
And I have been able to get big brands to interact with me
Nice.
on Threads because they're trying to build their audience just like I am. So like Whataburger commented on one of my photos and I'm like
hmm
gonna put that feather in my cap and wear it until I can't.
So, are you still thinking about starting your own podcast? I know we kind of briefly talked about that the last time.
You know, we did talk about that, and I've talked to several people about it. I don't think that I'll start like a true podcast, not like an audio podcast.
Hmm.
Um, I have thought about doing kind of like a video series on YouTube, talking about, you know, social media. And I actually have like several like episodes like mapped out, like the scripts and stuff written for them, like what I
Yeah.
would talk about. But I'm having such a hard time just like getting through all of the video editing I need to do for like
Sure.
just tournaments and sponsor stuff and all of that kind of thing that I'm trying not to add another iron to the fire right now.
Yeah.
But I definitely think it's something that I will do in the future.
All right. Yeah, that's fair. How much do you know, or do you know anything about how Google operates as far as, what information is toward the top when you do searches?
I would not consider myself an SEO expert. I know that it's important.
Yeah, it,
So
it
when I talk
is.
about like optimizing stuff, I mean it in particular like my YouTube stuff, like I pay for a separate service that helps optimize all of my YouTube descriptions, tags, titles, and thumbnails.
Okay.
So
Um,
it's not really, that doesn't really answer your like Google question, but I'm definitely a believer in optimizing things.
okay. Um, I want to ask you this real quick. So,
Yeah.
I was running a Twitter account and we did weekly contests.
Hmm.
So, for this particular contest, I was going to pull a photo, a fishing photo, and zoom in super close where you can see the pixels and have people guess what it is.
Okay.
And it was great. The response was great. So I typed in fishing on Google, hit images, and the very first picture was mine. It was
Ah,
for an article I wrote in Deeper Sonar, and I thought,
okay.
there's no way, it's pulling data from my phone, whether it's cookies or cache or whatever it is. So
Hmm.
I go to work, I do the same thing, and again, that picture is up. So I
Hmm.
called my friend who actually lives in Texas, and I asked him, "Hey, can you go on Google, type in fishing, hit images, what pops up?" And it was my photo, and it was amazing because I found it on accident. And not only was that amazing, that for the next year and a half, that photo was either one, two, or three. It would bounce around from week to week. For since I saw it for a year and a half. How is that possible?
I don't know. That's wild.
Isn't it wild?
Yeah, I honestly don't know, but now I know what my new nerdy side project is going to be.
So yeah,
Figuring out how that works.
it was pretty amazing. And then the next thing that happened, um, people were stealing that photo for ads.
Oh
Um,
no.
I got memed. I had friends who were part of these fishing groups on Facebook. They would, every other week they'd be sending me these memes, and luckily there were no bad
Oh.
ones.
Oh, well, that's good.
But it was crazy. It was really crazy, and the whole time I was on for probably about 2.5 years, I think. But I was up at the top for a strong year and a half, and I just thought maybe, with your background, you would know, how
That
like something like that could happen.
that one I don't have an answer to. That's gonna be some like weird internet web crawler, wherever the photo was posted, had some kind of hidden tag on it somewhere that just made it like the photo for fishing. That's pretty wild.
Uh, so do you have any companies you want to plug real quick?
Yeah, sure. So just kind of give a shout out to my sponsors. Hang on just a second. Sorry. I had some stuff kind of go wild on my desktop here. So yeah, so let me give a little plug to some of my sponsors. First and foremost, I got to thank Mariner Sales out of Dallas. They've been a huge support to me this year. They really helped me a lot. Waiting on my new kayak from them that I'll get pretty soon. Newport Vessels
Okay.
has been an amazing company to work with. Fish USA, Dobbins Rods, X Zone Lures, the Rod Glove, all of those folks. They've really been amazing. I just recently started working with Blue Storm gear that makes the PFDs that I like to wear. So
Okay.
yeah, I work with quite a few amazing companies. I've added some stuff to the belt this year. So
So, yeah, unfortunately, we're getting up against it here, and I'll wrap this up. But again, I truly appreciate you not only taking the time to talk with me tonight, but to record it so everyone else can listen to it. It was awesome. It was absolutely fantastic. And I can't recommend enough for everyone out there to give you a follow on Instagram and on TikTok. on YouTube. Like I said, you're absolutely crushing it. And yeah, let's give it up one last time for Wesley Gray. Thank you for taking the time, my friend. Hopefully you get to go to ICAST and be cool to meet you. And
Yeah, I hope so. They've purposely not scheduled any national tournaments. Pretty much like there's the Susquehanna tournament for Bassmaster is scheduled like the very last, like July 29th, but there's actually no other national tournament scheduled in the month of July this year for that purpose, because last year I would have went to ICAST because the Women's Fishing Federation was going to give me a badge.
nice.
And I ended up having to turn it down because I wanted to go fish lacrosse in Wisconsin. And ICAST was literally like it's a 2-day drive for me to get to lacrosse. So 2 days there, 2 days back. I would have been back for like a day and had to turn around and go to Florida for ICAST. And I just like I am really blessed in the fact that I can take a lot of time off of work and I have a lot of vacation time. You know, I've worked where I'm at for almost 20 years.
Wow. Okay.
So I'm really blessed in the sense I have a ton of time, but I do still have a full-time job, you know?
Yeah.
And so I can't like I can be gone 3 or 4 days here and there. But kind of being like out 2 weeks in a row like that is kind of hard for me even during the summer.
Sure.
So, but I am glad that I decided to go to lacrosse because that was, I think I came in 12th. So I cashed a check on that tournament. Didn't pay for my trip, but I did cash a check.
Nice. Yeah. Every tournament I've been in, I talk to the people. They're like, I never turn a profit, but I still do it.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I don't know that, and some people kind of maybe think I'm a little nuts for this. I'm not necessarily in it to cash checks.
Yeah.
I just like to do it. Like, I don't know how to explain that. And they're like, well, don't you just hate donating your money? And I'm like, no, not really. I mean,
you're paying for an experience.
Yeah.
You know, just like going to a movie, you know, you pay money, you watch the movie, and then you leave. So that's the way I thought of it. That's how I always approached it too.
Yeah. And I don't get so, like, I mean, I am competitive. So I don't, like, some people misinterpret or misunderstand. I am a very competitive person, but the tournament part is what gives me, like, a good reason to travel. And also, I feel like, and some people may think this is strange too, I feel like it's actually safer for me to go and fish these places when there is a tournament happening.
Oh,
like
I
if
agree.
I were just pick a random time during the middle of the year to go drive up to West Virginia and I'm just going to float the New River by myself, you know, there might be people around, but you know, I mean, I have friends all over the United States.
Yeah.
And so, and I just love, like, I love that aspect of it, you know, that there's people, like, I can be in La Crosse, Wisconsin, and there will be 15 people there that I know. So if something happens, I can call them. Yeah. And on like a different like topic, you kind of brought up like Facebook, kind of being like the whole pay to play situation.
Yeah.
And I really think that that's what part of my issue with growing on Facebook is. So that account is maybe just a little over a year old. I really did not want to start a fishing Facebook account at all.
Yeah. Is it a fan page or is it like a normal account?
It's a fan page.
Okay.
So it's an official page. It's not like my personal page or anything like that, or not built as a personal page. You know, it's built as an actual like fan page.
See, I think they did themselves a disservice by that, and I think it should be an actual page just for your fans. And what I mean by that is there's just all kinds of crap on the fan or the business side of the Facebook that just makes it almost impossible to try to get people to follow you that way. I don't know why they did that.
Yeah.
Um,
And this is something, it's not really so much a secret. And if anybody asked Nick, I have told people this before, like with Instagram,
yeah,
if you are willing to spend money to buy fake followers,
yeah,
go out there, take that money you were going to spend on those fake followers and run an ad through your Instagram account. It will
interesting.
it will make a world of difference for you. And
Like I
I
said,
have I have done it a handful of times.
okay,
And in it, what it does is, like if you have a reel or a post that one, like maybe you just really like it, or it
yeah,
does get some good engagement, like maybe some, and it's a little bit of kind of like trying and seeing what works.
hmm,
And because what worked for me may not work for you, like the algorithm is weird like that, so
yeah,
there's not like a one only right way to do this.
yeah,
But if you have a small following and you have a post that, like, oh my gosh, that kind of did well.
yeah,
Well, go out there in the app and just boost that post. And I know
okay,
some people are like, don't boost the post. That's so dumb. No,
hmm,
boost the dang post. And you can set it to do something like, I want to spend $5 a day for 10 days. That's $50.
yeah,
Your post gets put out there, and Instagram, you can do two different things. Instagram will either give you the option to let them choose followers like you, like
okay,
your account. And I've done that before. And then you can do the thing where you build your own audience. And I've done that before too. You
hmm,
will have more success if you build your own audience,
yeah, that makes
because
sense.
it's not the algorithm going in and going, I think this is what they mean. You can literally pick people who have just said they're interested in fishing, they're interested in hunting, they're interested in the outdoors and camping and this and that. You can literally pick their interests
Yeah,
and their geographic location inside the United States.
nice.
And you can narrow it down by some other things too, but do that, run it,
Hmm,
and I promise you, you'll probably get, depending on the size of your account and how much just reach it gets and all that kind of stuff, you're going to get 100 followers. I've gotten 1,000 followers
nice.
before.
Yeah,
So it is like a little bit pay to play.
sure.
But if is this is and this is the bottom line. If you are willing to spend money on fake followers, spend the money on Instagram boosting a post that gets you, may not be 10,000 followers,
Yeah,
but they're real. And
yeah,
they're people who will go in, they'll like your content, they'll comment on your content, they'll
hmm,
share your stuff.
yeah,
And it is much better to do that than it is to go the fake way.
sure. That makes. I've been in so many sponsored ads from other companies.
Mm-hmm.
I've been in a lot, but I've never actually thought about doing that myself. So that, that
Yeah,
is that's really interesting.
and people think, they were like kind of like, well, isn't that kind of like weird? Like, won't people think, what's the word I'm looking for? That it's kind of like cringy, right? It's kind of like, ooh, that's kind of cringy. Like you're running an ad
Self-absorbed.
for your, like,
Yeah,
yeah. And I'm like, well, not really, because one, it's not going to display that ad to your current followers.
sure.
So it's not going to show them that. That's not what you're trying to do.
Yeah,
And I think that if your goal is to grow your following so that you can be like, you know, being a sponsored angler, and I think a lot of people, they just want to collect sponsorships like badges.
yeah.
Um,
Oh yeah, yeah.
and then they don't want to do anything for the companies in return. And that is just like so beyond me. Like I just don't understand that mentality.
Yeah,
But the way I look at it is, I am the product here.
yeah,
Like, these companies are putting their investment in me, and I have to give them a return on their investment, which is helping them sell products, which is
yeah,
why, they're either paying me or giving me free stuff or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And if I'm not getting them anything out of it, they're not going to continue this relationship. And basically, the only thing that I have to give them in return is exposure to my followers.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you got to build that following in order to be able to do that. I don't know if you looked at my TikTok today, but I had a video go viral like a little over a week ago.
Really?
Yeah, it hit 4.5 million views
Oh
yesterday.
my God.
Yeah,
That's
and
crazy.
I mean, like I woke up to like and I usually check my social media notifications like the moment that I wake up in the morning.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have a problem, Nick. Like I'm addicted. Like I have a problem. And so open it up and I open up TikTok and I went, no, TikTok is broken. And then like I force closed the app and opened it again and it was like 2,996 followers. And I'm like,
Ooh.
what? Wait, what? And I'm like looking through my account and I'm like, what just happened? Like what has gone on? Like TikTok is broken.
Yeah.
And I mean, for probably 4 days, I had to turn all of my TikTok notifications off.
Yeah.
And I went from like maybe 3,000 or ish, like not quite 4,000 ish followers on TikTok
Okay.
to 18,000 in 48 hours.
That is amazing. That's
It's
amazing.
like TikTok almost shut my account down because of fraudulent activity. And I'm like, I promise it's not me. Like, I don't know what's happening. And it was a video that I had posted like in January.
Wow. It's so strange. Yeah.
Isn't it like I have no idea why, not a single solitary clue. And I have a really southern accent when I get excited sometimes, and I say funny things like golly and stuff like that, and so it's really just it was funny from the accent perspective, I think, is what appealed to people. But I had this Instagram account from some dude in Mexico steal the video from TikTok,
Jeez.
or he either stole it from TikTok or he got it off of Instagram because I had the same video posted.
Yeah.
And I've had to make all of my Instagram videos where they're not downloadable anymore. But anyway, he posted it on his account and he has like 500,000 followers.
God.
And he had the courtesy to tag me in it, which is how I found it. But I had to file a copyright claim with Instagram and they made him take it down.
Yeah.
But my interns kind of know, and it's so funny. So two of the interns, one of them was we were talking about this before Christmas break or like in January, and I was telling him, yeah, I'm like trying to build my YouTube channel, and I've got like 998 subscribers on YouTube. Like I just need two more people and I'll have 1,000. And they were like, wait, what? You have a YouTube channel? So they went out there and looked. So I actually know who my 999th and 1,000th
Oh,
subscriber
that's
on
awesome.
YouTube are. So that's really funny. But so today we all had this big meeting, and so one of them said something to me about, well, how's the YouTube channel going? And I said, listen, I just want y'all to know by the end of for spring break, I'll break 5,000 subscribers. And they were like, what? How did you do that so fast? And I'm like, because like I made a plan and I'm sticking to the plan.
Yeah.
And so anyway, it was kind of a fun conversation. And so they're all very like invested in my social media. And so anyway,
Well, I think that might have been better than the actual podcast.
hey, feel free to use parts of it. Just don't put me talking bad about